been a long
tour
time.
presentation that he's going to be giving to all state Toastmasters in order to support their effort in forming a new Toastmasters Club. So let's welcome Tim Wilson with your communication and connection.
When you're doing feedback, there are 3 steps to feedback. And the problem is most people leave out the 3rd step. Because they leave out the 3rd step, there are all sorts of feedback problems that happen. But before I get to the 3rd step, I've got to talk about the first 2 steps. Now, the first step of feedback is something that people tend to skip over and want to jump to the 2nd step. It'll become a little clearer a little bit. People do jump on the 1st step and want to get the 2nd step. So the 1st step is important. Not as important as the 3rd step that I'll get to in a little bit. But the 1st step of feedback is simply all about the problem. Identifying the problem. Have you ever been in a meeting where it's unclear what the problem is? Or people are talking, and somebody talks about, hey, I got this problem, and here's the problem over here. Somebody says, yeah, that's a great problem. Here's this problem over here. There's this problem over here. And they all kind of say, yeah, we're talking about the problem. And you suddenly realize they're all talking about different problems. Vic knows what I'm talking about. Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. People start talking about different problems. So the first step of feedback, before you even get further down, is to agree what the problem is. Make sure you know what the problem is. Now that's okay if you're dealing in a situation where you're in a meeting. Then someone can kick something in and say, I think the problem is this. Yeah, Harry, I agree, but let's take a look at this too. Okay, yeah, Bob, and you can kind of agree and come to consensus on what the problem is. A little different if the problem is somebody your boss or somebody above you has with you and what you're doing. In that case, what you really want to do is to get them to say exactly what the problem is. In their own words. Say, this is what the problem is. So you ask them, what do you think the problem is? And they say in their own words, this is exactly what the problem is. So that's the problem step. The second step that people are so eager to jump into is the solution. The solution. And this problem is so important to identify because if your solution has nothing to do with the problem, there's a disconnect. Have you ever been in a meeting too where people start talking about different solutions? Here's a solution for this, a solution for that, and they're all love these solutions, but it's nothing to do with the original problem? That can happen too. Tafik, you've had very interesting meetings. They'll have an interesting discussion later.
Every time.
Every time. So it's all about the solution. So figuring out what those solutions are and adding to that solution. Now in doing solutions, it really helps to do off-the-cuff speaking. And off-the-cuff, as you know from earlier, is about first thought, next thought, and new thought. It's this off-the-cuff process that helps you generate solutions and make sure everything works out together. And then you come to the 3rd step, the 3rd final step of feedback, and that is simply the step that most people ignore, tend to flow right past, but that is the follow-up. The follow-up. And really, feedback is follow-up. Feedback is follow-up, because follow-up is so important because it repeats the process. Once you get to the part about follow-up, you basically say, okay, we got this problem, here's a solution. Let's follow up on this and make sure later on that it actually solves the problem. So you don't have the problem coming up again or a new problem created. Now about this moment, you're probably thinking, Tim, wait a minute, it's really abstract. Can you give me an example of all this stuff? Okay. If you think back to the original example I had with Ted, and I was trying to book a hotel with Ted. And what Ted told me was, I said, why aren't you booking my hotels? And that sounds kind of like, okay, he's telling me what the problem is, but not really. What does he mean by that? Why aren't you booking my hotels? What does that exactly mean? So in this case, I could follow up the problem and say something like, okay, Ted, tell me exactly, in your words, what this problem is. What is exactly the problem here? And he might say, well, Tim, the problem is that you're creating all these alternate hotels, booking me to other hotels, and none of them is a hotel I'd want to stay at. So, okay, Ted, so what you're saying is that the problem is the alternate hotels I'm choosing aren't working for you. Well, that's good. Because then I know, I have an idea about maybe what a solution could be. That's the problem, I got a better idea what the solution is. So the problem is just, you aren't booking my hotels, well that's kind of vague, but now it's very specific. So then I go to the solution phase, I can start thinking my first thought. My first thought might be, okay, if the problem is that you don't like my alternate hotels, what if you gave me a listing of all the hotels you'd want to stay in order of these are the hotels I want to stay in New York. And I simply go down the list and then check off all the things that work there or don't work and find out something that's available. When I come to one that's available, I'll book that hotel. Did that work? Will that solve your problem? So here I'm just kind of brainstorming. That's my first thought. It's leaving this next thought about this list. I'm saying, will that work? And then Ted says, okay, yeah, that'll work. So just to be clear about the solution, you're going to give me a listing of all the hotels you want in order of you want them, and I'll simply go down the list and then book the one that's available in the order, going down the list in the order that you give them. That work? Yeah, Tim, that'll work. Now a lot of people stop there. Hey, it's a problem. There's a solution. Done. However, really important to follow up. The next step would be say, okay, Ted, I'm going to put something in your calendar for a month from now, so we can follow up later and find out, did that really solve your problem? Are you happier with the hotels you're getting now? Or is there some new problem that's now created because the way that these things are being booked, whatever that is. And you will know in about a month if there's any problems that come up in your travel situation. Is that okay? And that's the follow-up. And that's really all there is to it. It's really all there is to it. It's about that first step of the problem, getting set what that problem is, and then the solution with an off the cuff, and then finally following that up with a time to follow up. Follow up is feedback all the way through. All right, now that's the feedback process. The thing about the feedback process, a lot of things can go wrong. A lot of things can go wrong in doing the feedback process. It happens all the time. So, with a little bit of rest of the time we have here, get together with your friends, your neighbors soon to be your friends, and especially Tawfiq, you sound like you may have a couple of stories there, and talk about feedback challenges either you've had, somebody else has had, or you've heard about. Feedback challenges you've had, somebody else has had, or you've heard about. Get together with somebody now for about a minute.
What kind of problems do
Biggest
you have?
feedback challenge I have is there's not enough food.
Here.
And what's the problem?
So emails about
You
that.
gotta have something to serve.
There should be a time frame.
Are you trying to take my job?
And shove it!
Like there's not enough comics out there? I gotta compete with you now?
I was just working for my own entertainment. I don't like that. Great, they're bored. Feedback challenge. Feedback challenge I have is I'm too aggressive when I get feedback. I say, you need to straighten this shit out.
Well, is that better? I know most Toastmasters will sugar.
Not being able to
That is
think.
good. I can't wait to hear your next
That's
speech.
it.
Is there probably
They're all
needs to be
great.
recommended?
But does that help me? If it's great, I say, here's,
Or
Management style.
you know, you started out good at dropping
Or
the
you're not
ball.
being
We
allowed
gotta
to
pick
pick
this up.
up.
We're gonna do this. I'd like to know for
You're
me,
being
where
told
did
what to
I
do.
screw up?
You can
How
never
can I
say
improve this?
Yeah.
You know, I don't wanna just hear
That
great,
is a-
fantastic.
Actually, that's why we're trying to, this is actually.
So what would be the solution for that?
You need an educated manager to give you problems. So even if you ask.
Can you make that? Can you fix that?
The orders to educate you a little.
Especially
We
if
made
they
you
get
the
a bunch of
manager.
newbies, they don't even
So
get
we
speeches.
both-
How do they know how to evaluate?
They say, I like the part where you say,
So
everyone's got their own.
are you micromanaging your group?
Right. And actually, that's an interesting point. Feedback only works when the person who needs feedback
And then when we
is in
get to the
position to say
solution,
something
Yes.
about
They-
it. I can hear you, don't clap.
Ken can hear me. Everybody else. Ken has done this so many times, he knows how this thing works. All right, thank you for your thoughts and ideas. Dodge the bullet there, Ken. You don't have to hear me clap repeatedly. All right, what were you talking about back there? About feedback, challenges, issues, or a situation you've been in, you've heard about, or somebody else has. Larry, Peggy?
Well, I'm having feedback challenges right now with, I've sent an email looking for a response, and people are not responding to my emails. And I'm just waiting because I would like to follow up with somebody who asked me the question. So I'm looking for an approval for something, and I'm just waiting and waiting and waiting for my boss to get back to me.
Okay. Now that's more of a situation, the feedback process where you have a problem, here's the solution, here's the thought. That's more about just trying to get on somebody's calendar, and that can be a challenge too. But not some as deeply necessarily in a feedback situation. Once you get in that meeting and you start doing something, then you're going through and you're definitely having feedback. Right now you're just trying to get, it's not even back, it's just feed, I guess. You're just trying to get feed, basically.
Feed, yeah.
That's what he said.
Food, where's the feed?
Where's the food? There you go. Peggy, do you have anything that was related in addition to that? Or no? Okay. The feed.
Well, a lot of our work is putting out drafts to get feedback,
Okay.
right? And whenever we put out drafts, we always have this brainstorming process where we ask, you put out a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
You put out a lot of problems with the draft. You pull out problems that have nothing to do with the draft, don't have anything to do with the actual brief you're writing there. You're talking about things that are way off of the project. Then when you get to the solution stage, really you're still talking about more problems.
Right.
Like when you say the solution doesn't really match the problem, it's because you're still in that problem mindset.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
getting to the follow-up stage, unless you actually put down a list of things to follow up, it doesn't happen.
Well, definitely, you want to kind of exactly have your scope set for your problem. I mean, these are the sort of the problems to focus on, and this is what we're going to focus on right now. Otherwise, the scope goes crazy. And that happens in consultancy, where I work too a lot, is the problems just go way, way crazy. There are all sorts of problems here and there. No one has any solutions for them, but boy, everybody can figure out all these problems. You never get to a solution phase. People just keep on creating more problems. At some point, you got to say, stop. Here's the problem we're dealing with. Let's identify this, and then you can move on to some sort of solution phase. Yeah, definitely.
Sonia.
Yes,
I
please.
want-
Yes, go.
Actually, because I came across this problem like today. So we license funds, and one of our fund suppliers in London presented me with a problem, and so I told other people to do it, and I found out today it wasn't done. So the timely feedback, the follow-up is, I think, crucial. Because that's not my area. When I say something to ask somebody to do, you expect it's done, but it's not. And
Right.
then now I have a problem.
Yeah,
Again.
exactly. That's the situation of follow-up. So I've got a problem, and maybe we've got some solutions we're working on, but where's the follow-up to make sure those problems are actually being handled, those actual situations
Yeah,
are
I
actually
waited
taken
too long
care of?
to follow up. That's
Yeah, and then you set the follow-up right there. That's exactly right. You have to set the follow-up right at that time. And Ken wants to say something
About feedback.
about food.
About feedback, no. Sometimes you expect feedback from people who are not capable of giving quality feedback. They don't have the knowledge or the information or
Yeah.
the preparation.
Yeah, and that really goes back to the problem too. You've got to identify the right people, even identify the problem, and the right people working on that sort of a solution. But at this time, you might wonder, wait a minute, Tim, what does this have to do with Toastmasters? You got all this huge thing about problem and feedback and all this sort of stuff. And it really just simply goes back to this, the things we were talking about. And that is that in order to identify a problem, you have to be able to talk. And there are three things really stop you from talking. It's the freeze, the flight, and the fight reaction. So you've got to settle down and make sure you identify and you can face people and you can deal with, okay, here's the problem. It's going to be difficult to talk to your boss about. Difficult even sometimes to talk at a meeting about. Being able to open up the problem. And the second step is off the cuff. And off the cuff is simply table topics. Or you get a chance to practice that first thought. Get that first thought and make that connection with your audience, getting a better first thought. Practicing table topics to make sure your first thought gets better and better each time. And then follow-up is about routines. And of course, Toastmasters, the very nature of the meeting is all about a routine. It meets every week, meets every 2 weeks in this case. And it's that way that they have the routines, they set the routines. So really the Toastmasters can help you with the feedback process every step, all the way through. All right, that's the feedback process. We covered a lot of things. Just want to briefly go over those things we've covered at some other time.